Can we fix this?
See, but my camera's used to my ass, so, and your camera used to yours. So
What? This is unacceptable. It's a little bit better. I was a little gray. Okay.
It's Jouelzy. I'm in Austin, Texas, crashing at Evelyn from the internet's house. I gave her some brows earlier.
Brows.
So you can check that out on her channel. Link will be down below in the description box. Before we get into what the topic is, I'm just gonna ask that everybody engage us. I don't know why black people don't like to comment on videos. Like, are you scared the evil monster's gonna come after you if you leave a comment down below? But holla at me on Facebook and Twitter. We're gonna continue the conversation on Twitter anyway. African versus African American.
Why am I nervous?
I don't know. This could go very wrong in the comments below. Or let's start with why I asked Evelyn to have this conversation with me. Now, I am of African American descent, I guess. I am of the African diaspora. My family came to the Americas as slaves. Evelyn is from Kenya, a country on the East African coast. And for me, as an African American, what happens is a lot of times when I hear this discussion, it's such a singular discussion. And usually when they're talking about Africans, they're talking about West Africans or just Nigerians, because Nigerians are Africa. Usually it's middle-class Nigerians. Nigeria is one of the wealthier countries in Africa. They have oil money, populous black people on the world. What would be considered a middle-class West African and a world star hip-hop Negro. And I just don't feel like that's a fair comparison. It'd be interesting to have the conversation with somebody who's from East Africa, because typically the conversation tends to be a little bit different. And there might be a more worldwide preview about the other 54 countries that exist in Africa. Are we at 55 or 54 now? And that's another thing. I feel like the conversation with displaced Africans is different from Africans who decide to leave their country and kind of have the option of, you know.
Well, a little bit of background. I was born in the United States, but my parents were born in Kenya, and they came here in the 80s, and here I am. Most of my family is still in Kenya, and they came here to, you know, live free and prosper, as you always say. I've been here for over 20 years, but they became citizens like in the last 3 to 4 years.
I feel like there's that big of a difference between an African who lives in America and an African American.
Yeah. When I say difference, I just mean in terms of how they self-identify. My parents do, on a census or whatever, they do check African American, but only because they're /black, not American. So I feel people use the term African American to mean black, but that's not what that means.
So then how would you identify yourself?
I identify myself as black first.
Okay.
Then American. I don't like hyphenated titles. White people just get to be American. Why can't I also be American and be black? I'm a black American.
Right. I didn't identify as African American until I traveled out the country. I went to Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, in Dubai. They do differentiate between African and African American, largely, which was interesting to me, because they feel like African Americans have a culture in America from Africans that are here. I worked at Fader magazine, and the guy that, or Trace magazine, and the guy that owns Trace is from Togo. Did not think that African Americans had culture. He was all about like the exotic, the mixed, the multi-ethnic, or people that were from like different countries in Africa. But like when I was like, oh, I'm from Delaware, he's like, no girl, that is not cute. Went to Dubai, and it was like, oh, you're African American, like you're not Ethiopian, you're not Kenyan, you're not Nigerian. And I'm like, no, I'm just regular black. Oh, but they equate everything to like Jay-Z too.
Right.
But I do feel like there's an identity outside of America about what it means to be African American.
Right, and you would never know that unless you traveled abroad. Right. There's a thing that I feel like black Americans have to understand, especially with like my parents' generation and any discrimination that comes from them towards black Americans. They're learning about America the same way white people are.
Right, and I think there's ignorance on both sides of the fence, and that's why it's kind of this conversation, I feel like it's just always so singular, because I think people like your parents were considered middle class in Kenya, right?
Yes.
So for them to come here, and then it's like everybody here, well, before there was World Star Hip Hop, there was First 48, right? And so Africans at large are looking at black people in America like, oh my gosh, pork and bean projects, Chief Keef, like all the worst things about our culture. African Americans, by large, tend to those that are less culturally aware tend to look at Africans like either Chris Hansen's To Catch a Predator or, you know, click clack, right? And so I think on both sides of the fence, there's just misinformation about culture. You know, the internet is there for a reason. I know what a Zonto is. I also respect the things that I find culturally important as well.
Yes, definitely.
I just don't think it's a fair, like, comparison to be like, oh, Africans come here and Africans are better. We all doctors and lawyers. I find it amusing that people in the context of the conversation versus African Americans like to talk about Africa as if, ethnically speaking, it's unified.
Yeah, when in your own home country,
y'all still killing each other. Like, y'all still fighting.
There's the people like me who, growing up, I was too foreign to be black, to be African American, and I was too black, African American, to be Kenyan.
Well, do you think that's changed now, like with the kind of the access to information via the internet?
I don't get, no, I'm not African American. I still get, I'm not Kenyan, which I'm not.
You're not Kenyan?
I'm Kenyan-American.
No, I don't get it.
It's about ownership. What do I get to own because of my identity? I don't feel like I can own what it means to be a black American. I didn't have grandparents here during civil rights. I learned about it the same way white people learned about it in school. I have no, what is it called? Primary sources. So, and then when it comes to my Kenyan roots, when it comes to my Kenyan roots, I wasn't there. My parents left, you know what I'm saying? And I am heavily influenced culturally by being in the United States. So
I think what's interesting about black people in general is that we are very attached to a locale identity. And even amongst African Americans, and while we don't have like true ethnic lines to describe us, there's a very big difference between an African American who grew up in New Jersey from an African American who grew up out in like Shreveport, Louisiana, is out in Biloxi, Mississippi, like out in the rural areas, you know, especially when you start getting into like the Delta area where there's a lot of Creole culture or the Geechee people in South Carolina. You know, there are differences amongst African Americans. We just don't have an easy way to identify it via like a tribal or ethnic group, but we will attach ourselves to a locale. It's levels to this.
It's levels.
All are so attached to like land and location, and it just seems like, don't we have a culture that can take us wherever we go? Like, you still take your Kenyan culture with you no matter where you go.
And not as much now because I don't care, but growing up, like I talked about, the need to be authentic. Am I American enough for my American friends?
But what is American?
It's what I perceived. It's what people told, that you have two identities. You have the identity you believe and the identity that everyone projects onto you. And you have to reconcile those two things. Hopefully you do that sooner rather than later.
I mean, I was told I was never black enough. Like, I am of the brighter variety. And close if I'm ever going to get to saying that I'm white skin.
Say it. Light skin.
And my family was like conservative Christian Jehovah's Witnesses, which is like some new-ish, right? So I was always kind of teased about not being black enough into rap music growing up. But I don't feel like the African American or even the black identity is beholden to like, and that's probably why the conversation is always so different, because it just depends on who you talk to and what they value. Some people value rap music, but I feel like there's a whole legacy of Motown and soul music. If you really want to get political with it, the transatlantic loop, which is this idea that African culture, specifically Central African, like Congo culture, or what is now known as the Congo, influenced jazz music. So when you came into the era of like Coltrane and Davis, because blacks got more into it, we got into like cool jazz and funk, right? And the term funk actually comes from a Congolese culture, whatever. I'm not going to get into Flash of the Spirit right now, but then we came back around and we influenced African music with somebody like Afela or Afrobeat, which heavily used African music with a soul rhythm that, you know, transpired between the transatlantic loop. So we all influence each other, and I totally forget what my point was.
You're light-skinned and you
right, but I think it all is just kind of, we all become a melting pot of the world, you know, and we all kind of inspire each other, and we can take things from each other, and it's just kind of, what do you to say I think there's more to African American culture than what some people might let on, even African Americans themselves. So like there's a history, it's just sometimes we tend to overlook it and we just take things and make them important, but it's all of personal opinion.
Sometimes you have to correct your elders, you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes I will catch an older African person saying just the wrong, just projecting stereotypes onto Black Americans. And because I identify as a Black American, I have to be like, look, no, like you have to set them straight.
I think that there's diversities on both sides. Africa is a continent of 50-something countries.
But they will still, my parents will still identify with some other country before they identify.
Right, in America, but when you go back to Africa, you have nothing to do with them. Yeah, you know, a Nigerian doesn't have that nice of opinion of a Kenyan. In America, it's like African Student Union. Types that people have of African American.
I mean, okay, like I said before, everything that Africans in the U.S. know about Black people, Black Americans, comes from where? The local news. So, story on Channel 5 talking about how this line for the New Jays wraps around the corner. It's on the news.
So we're Jordan.
So my parents are watching the news and they're like, value are the shoes. Where's the college degree? And I'm like, you can't say that. And you have to correct them. Be like, listen, you're technically talking about your son. Because walking down the street, the police officer's not going to be like, oh, he's Kenyan. No! He's a nigga.
The only stereotypes that I have of Africans is that they eat a lot of rice.
Of varying flavors. Each country got their own rice.
Like some of them put some spinach in it. Some of them put some cilantro in it. There's always like green specks or something in the rice, carrots. But everybody eats a lot of rice. There's a lot. So I got into an argument with my homegirl who is from Sierra Leone about the fact that I say that I probably could never marry an African because of their mothers. Because I don't even think it's an African American thing. I just don't grow up. I didn't grow up in a household where my mother
dictated.
No, she dictated. Oh. Like as long as I lived in her house, she dictated what I did. But now that I pay my own bills, she can't come into my house and be like, "You did not clean your dishes properly. Re-clean them." And I just, from what I know of even what I've seen of my homegirls who have married African men, their mothers just have a very large influence on how their house runs. A mother-in-law that like hates me because I'm messy. I'm not a clean person, and I just don't want her coming into my house talking about sucking her. Like I can't even suck my teeth that hard.
You gotta
learn. He's allowed to come into your house. That's family whenever they want.
Yep.
Like they could just stay. Like they just come and camp out for like 3 months, and you're just like, no, you got to go. Like blood or not, bye. Like Candy with her mother and the fact that she just won't say anything to her mom no matter how far out her mom goes. And I feel like that is, you know. Well, what are your opinions on the African versus African American debate? Do you as an African American feel that you have a culture? Are there any insecurities that you have as an African American about where you stand in this whole spectrum of the African diaspora?
If you know your roots in the motherland, have you found yourself trying to correct these stereotypes of Black Americans? Because our parents can be a little bit much. They can be a little bit much.
And do you ever feel that you get any sort of shade from the Black community about your African heritage? Let us know your thoughts.
Yes.
Maybe we'll do like a tweet chat and we'll let you know about it.
You're invited to Kenya at any time.
Zanzibar and Mombasa.
Yeah, it's the beach. You can get brown. You can get
I can be closer to God.
All right, so
and you're always invited to DC, I guess. Delaware. Right. You can come over and I'll make you some collard greens.
Good. I've actually never had collard greens.
Collard greens are amazing, but they have to be done correctly. But thanks for watching, guys. You can find Evelyn on the internet at
Facebook.com/Evelyn from the internets, Instagram.com/Evelyn from the internets, Twitter.com/EVZ, and my YouTube channel is Evelyn from the internet.
All links will be down below. And of course, I'm Jouelzy. Find me all over the webs at Jouelzy. Thanks for watching.
Bye. Any Sudanese people watching this?
No, I do have Sudanese
followers,
subscribers, but they're in America and North Dakota. And that's another thing. I feel